The folded paper sat on my driver's seat, crisp and white against the gray upholstery. Impossible to miss. My heart stuttered as I stared through the car window at it, my keys already in hand. The doors were locked. I had checked them twice this morning before heading into the grocery store. The same paranoid habit I had developed over my 62 years living in Detroit. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I start my story, I would love to know what city you are joining me from. Feel free to share it in the comments. Now, let me immerse you in this story. I circled the Honda Civic, my shopping bags cutting into my palms as I inspected each window, each door seal. No broken glass glittered on the asphalt. No scratches marked the weather stripping. The October wind whipped through the parking lot, sending dried leaves skittering under nearby cars, but my vehicle appeared untouched. Pristine, secure. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the door. The paper felt expensive, heavy stock that crackled when I unfolded it. Block letters filled the page, written in thick black marker that had bled slightly through to the other side. I know where you live. I know your routine. Stop asking questions. The grocery bags slipped from my hands, cans rolling across the parking lot. My breath came in short gasps as I spun around, scanning the scattered cars, the strip mall storefronts, the tree line beyond the lot. A young couple loaded groceries 3 rows over. An elderly man pushed a cart toward the store entrance. Nobody looked my way. Nobody appeared to be watching. But someone had been. Someone had gotten inside my locked car. I pressed my back against the vehicle, the metal cold through my jacket. The note crumpled in my fist as my mind raced through the past 3 weeks. The city council meetings where I had stood up to demand answers about the new construction project displacing families from the neighborhood. The visits to the developer's office downtown, where I had asked to see permits and environmental impact reports. The interviews I had given to the local news station about suspicious midnight demolitions. My phone was already in my hand, my daughter's number half dialed, when I saw the second detail I had missed. There, tucked under the windshield wiper, another folded paper fluttered in the breeze. I forced my legs to move, each step deliberate despite the adrenaline flooding my system. This note was identical to the first, same paper, same marker, same block letters. This is your only warning. The shopping bags forgotten, I climbed into the car and locked the doors, my hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to insert the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I backed out fast, tires squealing. In my rearview mirror, I watched the parking lot recede, searching for any vehicle that might follow, any figure that might step out from between the parked cars. The drive home took 12 minutes. I checked my mirrors constantly, taking random turns through residential streets I had known since childhood. No one followed. No cars appeared suspicious. But my pulse refused to slow, hammering against my ribs like it wanted to break free. My house sat quiet on Maple Street, the yellow siding warm in the afternoon sun, the oak tree in the front yard shedding its crimson leaves onto the lawn. I had lived here for 37 years, raised 2 children within these walls, buried my husband from the funeral home 3 blocks away. This was my sanctuary, or it had been. I parked in the driveway instead of the garage, unwilling to trap myself in an enclosed space. The walk to my front door felt like miles. My keys jangled as I sorted through them, and I kept glancing over my shoulder at the empty street. The deadbolt clicked open. I stepped inside and immediately froze. A third note lay on my kitchen table. My breath caught in my throat. The paper sat centered on the wooden table, stark white against the dark grain, as if someone had placed it with deliberate care. hadn't left that note there. I had locked my house before leaving, checked the door twice, a habit ingrained over decades of living alone. Someone had been inside my home. My knees weakened. I grabbed the doorframe for support, my fingernails digging into the painted wood. The kitchen looked untouched otherwise. The blue ceramic fruit bowl still sat in its usual spot, the coffee maker positioned against the backsplash, the dish towel draped over the oven handle exactly as I had left it. Nothing disturbed, nothing moved, except for that note. I forced my legs to carry me backward, out of the kitchen, my eyes never leaving the paper. My heel caught on the threshold between the linoleum and the hardwood. I stumbled, catching myself against the wall, my palm leaving a damp print on the beige paint. The front door still stood open behind me. Fresh air poured in, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and Mrs. Henderson's rosemary hedge from next door. I could run, get back in my car, drive to the police station downtown. But I needed to see what the note said. My hand trembled as I pulled my phone from my purse. The screen lit up, and I opened the camera app, holding it in front of me like a shield as I edged back into the kitchen. Through the screen, I could see the table, the note, the empty chairs tucked neatly beneath the table's edge. I moved closer. 3 steps. 5. Close enough now to read the words scrawled in that same brutal black marker. You should have stopped asking questions. The phone nearly slipped from my grip. I caught it, pressed the button, heard the artificial shutter sound as the photo saved. My chest constricted, each breath coming shorter than the last. Questions. What questions? I had asked dozens of questions over the past 3 weeks, ever since the church committee meeting when Reverend Thomas had announced the sudden closure of the youth center, citing budget concerns that didn't match the financial reports I had reviewed as treasurer. I had questioned the discrepancies, asked for documentation, requested a full audit, and then the notes had started. A floorboard creaked upstairs. My entire body went rigid. The sound came from directly above the kitchen, my bedroom. I stared at the ceiling, watching the old light fixture sway slightly, its chain making the faintest tinkling sound against the glass shade. Someone was still in my house. My feet moved before my brain could catch up, carrying me toward the front door in stumbling steps. I grabbed my purse from where it had fallen, not stopping to close the door behind me as I burst onto the porch. The wooden steps rattled under my weight as I took them 2 at a time, my ankle rolling painfully on the last one. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The car door handle felt slick under my palm, and I yanked it open, throwing myself inside. My fingers jabbed at the lock button, missing twice before all 4 locks engaged with a solid thunk. The phone. I needed to call someone. My hands shook so violently I could barely swipe the screen open. The emergency call button glowed red at the bottom. Movement in my peripheral vision made me jerk my head up. A figure stood at my bedroom window, partially hidden behind the curtain I had bought at the craft fair last spring. Tall, broad-shouldered, watching. Then the curtain fell back into place. I screamed, the sound trapped inside the car, bouncing off the windows. My thumb found the emergency button. It rang once, twice. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's in my house. The words tumbled out, high and breathy. Someone broke into my house and they're still inside. Ma'am, what's your address? 42 Maple Street. Please hurry. Please. Officers are being dispatched. Are you in a safe location? I'm in my car, in the driveway. I watched the window, waiting for the figure to reappear. They're upstairs. I saw them. Stay in your vehicle with the doors locked. Don't go back inside. Officers will arrive in approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes, 240 seconds, an eternity. I kept the phone pressed to my ear, the dispatcher's voice a distant murmur as she asked questions I couldn't process. My eyes fixed on the window, then darted to the front door I had left wide open, then to the rearview mirror, checking for any approach from behind. The curtain twitched again. The curtain hung motionless now, as if what I had seen was nothing more than a trick of morning light. But my racing pulse knew better. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone, asking something about suspects, about descriptions, but the words dissolved into static against the roar of blood in my ears. A patrol car rounded the corner 2 blocks down. No sirens, just the rapid approach of white and blue cutting through the suburban stillness. I released a breath I didn't know I was holding. The car pulled up beside mine, and an officer emerged, a young woman with her hand already resting on her belt. She approached my window with cautious steps, her eyes scanning the house behind me. I fumbled with the door lock, my fingers still trembling, and pushed it open. "Ma'am, I need you to stay in the vehicle." Her voice carried the kind of authority that came from training, not experience. Fresh-faced, maybe 25 at most. "The upstairs window. Someone was there." She nodded once, speaking into the radio clipped to her shoulder. Numbers and codes I didn't understand. A second patrol car appeared, this one carrying an older officer, gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. They conferred near my front door, their gestures quick and deliberate, before the older one drew his weapon and disappeared inside my house. The young officer remained outside, positioned where she could watch both the front door and the windows above. Her stance was wide, balanced, ready. I watched her profile, the way her jaw clenched and released, the slight adjustment of her grip on her flashlight despite the morning sun flooding the street with light. Minutes crawled past. A neighbor 3 houses down stepped onto her porch, coffee mug in hand, staring. Mrs. Henderson from across the street emerged with her miniature poodle, slowing her usual brisk walk to a glacial pace as she pretended not to gawk. The violation of someone entering my home was now compounded by the spectacle of police presence, transforming my private terror into neighborhood entertainment. The older officer reappeared at my front door, holstering his weapon. He spoke into his radio, then gestured for the young officer to join him. They had a brief exchange, his head shaking, before he approached my car. "House is clear, Mrs. Cooper. No signs of forced entry." I pushed myself out of the vehicle, my legs unsteady beneath me. "I saw someone, at that window." My arm lifted, finger pointing at my bedroom. "We checked every room, every closet. Windows are all locked from the inside." He pulled a notebook from his pocket, pen poised. "You said you found another note this morning?" I retrieved it from the passenger seat where I had thrown it, the paper now crumpled and damp from my grip. He took it with gloved hands, examining both sides. "Same as the others?" "Same paper. Same handwriting." He sealed it in a plastic evidence bag pulled from his vest pocket. And you're certain your vehicle was locked when you went inside?" The question landed like an accusation. "I always lock it. Always. No signs of tampering with the locks. No broken glass." He clicked his pen, making a note. "You mentioned previous incidents. How many times has this happened?" 3 notes total. This makes 4. My voice cracked on the number. "Someone has a key. They have to." "Have you given anyone access to your vehicle recently? Valet parking, mechanic, car wash?" I thought back through the past weeks. The oil change at the service station on Route 9. the parking garage downtown when I met my book club for lunch, the mall lot where I had spent 2 hours shopping for birthday gifts last Tuesday. Just normal places, nothing unusual. The young officer emerged from my house, shaking her head at her partner. He nodded, then turned his attention back to me. I'm going to recommend you change your locks. Vehicle and home. Get a security system installed if you don't have one already. I have cameras. They don't show anything. No footage at all? Static. Just static, during the exact windows when the notes were left. I wrapped my arms around myself despite the warmth of the morning. Someone knows what they're doing. He exchanged a glance with his partner, something unspoken passing between them. We'll file the report. Dust for prints. But honestly, Mrs. Cooper, without catching someone in the act. So, I just wait? Keep finding these threats until what? The words burst out sharper than intended. Until they decide to do more than leave notes? He had no answer for that. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant bark of Mrs. Henderson's poodle and the rustle of wind through the oak tree shading my driveway. Story block for Toten. I watched the patrol car disappear around the corner, its taillights blinking once before vanishing from view. The report number sat folded in my pocket like a stone. My fingers traced the edges through the fabric while I stood motionless in my driveway, staring at the Honda as if it might suddenly reveal its secrets. The sun had climbed higher, turning the windshield into a mirror that reflected nothing but sky and branches. I needed to move. Do something. My feet carried me past the car, past the flower beds where marigolds drooped from lack of water, toward the side gate leading to my backyard. The latch stuck as always, requiring that specific upward lift and twist I'd performed 10,000 times over 30 years of living here. Behind the house, my storage shed stood partially hidden by overgrown forsythia bushes. The padlock hung open on its hasp. My chest tightened. I always secured that lock. Always. The double check before bed had become ritual, right after testing the back door and setting the kitchen alarm. I pulled the shed door wide. Morning light spilled across lawn equipment, paint cans, boxes of Christmas decorations. Everything appeared untouched. But the air felt wrong, disturbed somehow, as if someone had recently stood in this exact spot, breathing the same musty combination of gasoline and old wood. A footprint marked the dusty floor near my gardening supplies. Fresh. The tread pattern showed clear and deliberate, too large to be mine. My hand shot out to steady myself against the workbench, knocking over a coffee can filled with screws. They scattered across the concrete with sharp metallic pings that seemed impossibly loud. I backed out of the shed, pulling my phone from my pocket. My thumb hovered over 911 before logic intervened. What would I tell them? That I found an unlocked shed and a footprint? They'd just left. The officers had checked my property. Supposedly. The back door to my house stood 15 feet away. I reached it in seconds, fumbling with my keys, dropping them once before managing to jam the right one into the deadbolt. Inside, I moved through each room with deliberate steps, checking closets and behind doors, under beds, and inside the shower stall. Nothing. Everything sat exactly where I'd left it 2 hours ago. In my bedroom, I pulled the wooden chair from my vanity and wedged it under the doorknob. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my phone's security app. The cameras showed 4 views of my property: front door, driveway, backyard, and side gate. I scrolled backward through the footage, watching myself in reverse walk from the driveway to the shed, then further back to when the police had arrived. My finger stopped on the timestamp from last night. 11:43 p.m. The shed camera showed clear footage of shadows and moonlight until 11:47. Then static consumed the screen. 4 minutes of electronic snow before the image resolved again at 11:51. During those 4 minutes, someone had entered my shed. Someone who knew exactly where my cameras were and how to disrupt them. I downloaded the footage to my phone and sent it to myself via email, creating backups in 3 different locations. The technological precautions felt hollow. What good was evidence if it showed nothing but white noise? My landline rang from the kitchen. The sound jolted through me like electricity. I walked to it slowly, watching it vibrate on the counter through 2 more rings before lifting the receiver. Hello? Breathing. Steady and deliberate on the other end. Not heavy or threatening, just the simple sound of someone listening. Who is this? My voice came out stronger than I felt. The breathing continued for 3 more seconds. Then the line went dead. I slammed the receiver down hard enough that it bounced from its cradle, dangling by its cord. My hands shook as I pulled it up and pressed *69. The automated voice informed me the number was blocked. Of course it was. The kitchen suddenly felt too exposed. 3 windows overlooked the backyard. Their curtains pulled open to let in morning light that now seemed garish and revealing. I moved to each one, yanking the fabric closed, plunging the room into artificial twilight. Then I checked the back door lock again, still secured. The deadbolt extended fully into its housing. My car keys sat on the counter where I'd thrown them. I picked them up, feeling their familiar weight, and made a decision. The Honda needed to go to a different mechanic. Someone I trusted. My nephew Terrell worked at an auto shop across town. He'd know people who could check my car thoroughly, maybe find something the police had missed. I grabbed my purse and headed for the front door, then stopped. Going outside meant exposure, meant being visible. Whoever was doing this might be watching right now, waiting to see how I'd react. But staying inside meant being trapped, meant letting fear make my decisions. I unlocked the door and stepped onto my porch. The neighborhood looked exactly as it always did. Mrs. Henderson walked her poodle 3 houses down. A delivery truck rumbled past. 2 kids rode bicycles on the opposite sidewalk, their laughter carrying across perfectly manicured lawns. Normal. Everything appeared completely normal. I descended the steps and approached my car, keys extended like a weapon. The door unlocked with its familiar chirp. I checked the back seat through the window before opening the door. Empty. I slid into the driver's seat and immediately locked all the doors, cocooning myself in steel and glass. The ignition turned smoothly. The engine caught and hummed. I shifted into reverse and began backing out of the driveway when movement caught my eye in the rearview mirror. A figure stood at the end of my driveway, motionless, wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt despite the warm morning. I couldn't see a face. Just the dark oval of the hood's opening pointed directly at my car. My foot slammed the brake. The Honda jerked to a stop. My hands locked on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening as I stared at the hooded figure blocking my path. The person didn't move, didn't step aside, just stood there like a statue cast in shadow and threat. I pressed hard on the horn. The blast shattered the morning quiet, causing Mrs. Henderson to jerk around and her poodle to bark. The figure still didn't move. My heart hammered against my ribs. I shifted into park and reached for my phone, fingers fumbling with the screen. The 911 digits glowed up at me. 1 tap, and police would come. 1 tap, and this would escalate into something official, something documented. But when I looked up again, the figure was gone. I blinked hard, scanning the street in every direction. Nothing. No one running. No movement except Mrs. Henderson continuing her walk, the poodle tugging at its leash. The delivery truck had disappeared around the corner. The two kids on bicycles had pedaled out of sight. Had I imagined it? No, impossible. Someone had stood there, hood pulled low, watching me reverse out of my driveway. I shifted back into reverse and completed the maneuver, my gaze darting between all three mirrors. Every parked car suddenly looked suspicious. Every tree could hide a watcher. I pulled forward and accelerated down my street, checking the rearview mirror every 3 seconds. No one followed. The drive to Terrell's auto shop took 20 minutes through midday traffic. I gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, hyper-aware of every vehicle that stayed behind me for more than 2 blocks. A blue sedan followed for 6 blocks before turning off. A white pickup stayed behind me for nearly a mile before taking the highway entrance. Neither was actually following me, but my nervous system treated them as threats anyway. The shop sat in an industrial area near the rail yard, a squat concrete building with 3 garage bays and a small office attached. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips. Oil stains decorated the cracked parking lot like abstract art. I pulled into a space near the office door and killed the engine. Through the open garage bays, I could see Terrell bent over an engine block, his tall frame folded at an uncomfortable angle. Grease streaked his forearms. He wore the same Detroit Pistons jersey he'd owned since high school, now faded and spotted with motor oil. I climbed out of my car and headed toward the garage. The smell of motor oil and exhaust filled my lungs. Somewhere inside the building, an air compressor hissed and wheezed. Metal clanged against concrete. Terrell straightened when he saw me, wiping his hands on a red rag that had probably never been clean. His expression shifted from surprise to concern in the span of a heartbeat. "Aunt Gloria, everything okay?" I opened my mouth to explain, then closed it. Where did I even start? Someone was breaking into my locked car to leave threatening notes, and I had no idea how they were doing it or why they were targeting me. "I need you to check my car," I said. "Someone's getting inside it, leaving things." Terrell's eyebrows drew together. He glanced past me at the Honda sitting in the parking lot, then back at my face. Whatever he saw there made him drop the rag on his workbench and motion for me to follow. We walked back to my car together. He circled it slowly, examining the doors, the locks, the window seals. His hands moved with practiced precision, testing each door handle, running fingers along the rubber weather stripping. "No visible damage," he said, crouching beside the driver's door. "Locks look intact." "That's what the police said." He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, angling it to illuminate the lock mechanism from different positions. "Signal cloners can capture the frequency from your key fob. Someone stands near you at the grocery store, copies your signal, then they can unlock your car whenever they want." My stomach dropped. "How do I stop that?" "Keep your key fob in a signal-blocking pouch, but that doesn't help with what's already happened." He straightened and looked at me directly. "What kind of things are they leaving?" "Notes. Threatening ones." His jaw tightened. "You call the police?" "They filed a report, treated it like vandalism." I wrapped my arms around myself despite the warmth. "Terrell, someone stood at the end of my driveway this morning, just stood there watching me, wearing a hood so I couldn't see their face." His expression darkened. He glanced around the parking lot, scanning the empty spaces and parked vehicles. "You see which direction they went?" "They disappeared. 1 second they were there, next second gone." Terrell pulled out his phone again and made a call. "Hey, Marcus, you busy? I need you to check something for me." He listened for a moment. Yeah, now if you can. Bay 2. He hung up and gestured toward the garage. I want Marcus to sweep your car for tracking devices. If someone's this committed, they might be monitoring your movements. Marcus. Another character entering the story. Another person who would learn about my situation. The circle kept expanding, my privacy eroding with each retelling. We moved the Honda into the empty second bay. Terrell positioned it over the hydraulic lift and raised it 4 feet off the ground. The undercarriage came into view, dark and grimy with road dirt. A man appeared in the bay entrance, younger than Terrell by maybe 5 years, wearing coveralls with Marcus embroidered over the chest pocket. He carried a yellow device about the size of a lunchbox, bristling with antennas and dials. GPS detector, he said, holding up the device. If someone planted a tracker, this'll find it. He didn't wait for introduction or explanation, just powered on the device and began walking around my suspended car, watching the display screen. The device emitted a soft beeping that increased in frequency as he moved toward different areas. Near the rear bumper, the beeping accelerated into a rapid staccato. Marcus dropped to one knee and aimed a flashlight at the undercarriage. His free hand reached up, fingers probing the space behind the bumper. When he pulled his hand back, a small black object rested in his palm. Magnetic GPS tracker, he said, holding it up for us to see. Battery powered. Someone's been following your every move. The device looked innocuous. Small and rectangular, barely larger than a matchbox. But it represented something far more sinister than threatening notes. This was surveillance. This was someone mapping my routines, learning my patterns, studying my life. My fingers went numb. The tracker sat in Marcus's palm like a malignant tumor, and I couldn't look away from it. The shop's fluorescent lights caught its black plastic surface, highlighting fingerprint smudges along one edge. Someone had handled this recently. Someone had crouched beside my car in a parking lot or on my street, reached underneath, and attached this thing to metal. How long? My voice came out hoarse. How long has it been there? Marcus turned the device over, examining the underside. He pressed his thumbnail against a small seam, and the casing popped open. A circuit board gleamed green inside, a small battery clipped to one corner. This model runs about 3 weeks on a charge, he said. Battery's still got juice, but it's getting low. Maybe 2-3 days left. 3 weeks. My mind raced backward through the calendar. 3 weeks ago, I'd been living my normal life, oblivious. Going to the grocery store, driving to my sister's house, stopping at the pharmacy for blood pressure medication. Every turn, every stop, every destination recorded and transmitted to someone's phone or computer. Terrell moved closer, his work boots scraping against the concrete floor. He pulled a phone from his pocket and held it near the tracker, snapping photos from multiple angles. Need to document this, he said. Police'll want pictures, serial numbers, if it has any. The word police hit me like cold water. I'd been avoiding that step, clinging to the hope this was something manageable, something I could handle quietly, but surveillance equipment changed everything. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was stalking. This was someone investing time and money into monitoring my movements. I pulled out my own phone with shaking hands and dialed Detective Bryant's number. She'd given me her card yesterday when I'd filed the report about the notes. The line rang 4 times before connecting to voicemail. Her professional greeting played through, promising to return calls within 24 hours. This is Gloria Cooper, I said after the beep. We spoke yesterday about the threatening notes. We found something, a GPS tracker attached to my car. I'm at Terrell's Auto on Chambers Street. Please call me back. I ended the call and stared at the phone's screen, willing it to ring immediately. It stayed silent. Marcus had set the tracker on a workbench and was examining it with a magnifying glass. His movements were methodical, professional. He'd clearly done this before. "See this?" He pointed to a tiny inscription on the circuit board. "That's a model number. These things are sold online, completely legal. Amazon, eBay, dozens of other sites. Anyone can buy one for about $50. $50? That's all it costs to violate someone's privacy, to turn their daily life into a tracked and recorded dataset. I thought about all the places I'd driven in the past 3 weeks. The bank where I managed the retirement account David had left me. The oncologist's office where I'd gone for a routine follow-up. The support group meeting at the community center where I'd shared personal struggles with other widows. Whoever planted this tracker knew all of it now. My stomach lurched. I pressed my hand against the workbench to steady myself, metal cold against my palm. The shop's air suddenly felt too thick, too warm. Sweat prickled along my hairline. "Need to sit?" Terrell's hand appeared at my elbow, ready to guide me toward a folding chair in the corner. I shook my head. Sitting would make it worse, would make me feel helpless, like a victim waiting for rescue. I needed to move, to do something productive with the adrenaline flooding my system. "Check the rest of the car," I said. "If there's one tracker, there might be more." Marcus nodded and picked up his detector again. He moved toward the Honda with renewed focus, running the device along the wheel wells, under the hood, around the trunk. The beeping remained steady, no acceleration indicating additional devices. After 10 minutes of thorough searching, he lowered the detector and powered it off. "Just the one," he said. "At least nothing electronic that's transmitting. Could still be other things. Cameras, audio bugs that record locally instead of broadcasting." The possibility sent ice down my spine. I moved to the car and opened the driver's door, scanning the interior with new eyes. The fabric seats, the dashboard, the rearview mirror, any of it could conceal a device small enough to escape casual notice. Modern surveillance equipment was tiny, easily hidden in the space behind a panel or tucked into upholstery. I checked the dome light, pressing my fingers around its plastic housing. Solid. No gaps or modifications. The air vents came next, then the storage compartments, then the space under both front seats. My hands moved frantically, searching, probing every surface within reach. Nothing. But that proved nothing. A skilled installer could hide equipment where I'd never find it without disassembling the entire vehicle. Terrell climbed into the passenger seat and began his own inspection, more systematic than mine. He checked behind the glove box, feeling for wires or attachments. He removed the floor mats and examined the carpet underneath. He even popped open the fuse box and studied its contents, comparing the installed fuses against a diagram on the panel cover. 20 minutes of searching yielded nothing beyond the original tracker. Marcus had bagged it in clear plastic and sealed it with red evidence tape he'd pulled from a drawer in his toolbox. The bag sat on the workbench like an accusation. My phone finally rang. Detective Bryant's name appeared on the screen. "Ms. Cooper?" she said when I answered. "I got your message. You found a tracking device?" "Under the rear bumper." "The mechanic has it bagged as evidence." "Don't let anyone touch it further," she said. "I'm sending an officer to collect it. Should be there in 15 minutes. The line went dead. No reassurance, no questions about my safety, just efficient instructions. I suppose that was her job. Gather evidence, build a case, follow procedure. The emotional support would have to come from somewhere else. I looked at my car, still suspended on the lift, its vulnerable undercarriage exposed. Someone had violated it, had crouched in the dark with a flashlight and this magnetic tracker, had reached up and attached it to metal, had walked away knowing they'd soon have access to every detail of my daily routine. The notes had been disturbing. This was terrifying. The patrol officer arrived in an unmarked sedan, not the cruiser I'd expected. She stepped out wearing plain clothes, jeans and a navy windbreaker with police printed across the back in faded yellow letters. Her badge hung from a lanyard around her neck, swinging as she walked toward the service bay. Marcus handed over the bagged tracker without ceremony. She held it up to the fluorescent lights, turning it slowly to examine it from different angles. Her expression revealed nothing, just professional detachment as she photographed it with her phone from multiple sides. "Detective Bryant will run prints," she said, slipping the evidence into a larger bag she'd brought. Though these things are usually wiped clean. She left as quickly as she'd arrived. No report taken, no questions asked, just collection and departure. I paid Marcus $200 in cash for the inspection work. He lowered my car from the lift, the hydraulic system hissing as the wheels touched concrete again. The familiar sound should have been comforting. Instead, my stomach clenched watching it descend, knowing someone had been underneath it recently. Someone with malicious intent. The drive home took 40 minutes through afternoon traffic. My eyes tracked every vehicle that stayed behind me for more than 2 blocks. A silver SUV followed for 8 blocks before turning off. A black pickup truck maintained the same distance for nearly a mile. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel too hard. The parking lot of my apartment complex looked normal when I pulled in. Same cars in their usual spots. Mrs. Henderson from 3B loading groceries from her trunk. 2 kids riding bikes in circles near the mailboxes. Everything ordinary. Everything peaceful. I parked in my assigned space and sat for a full minute scanning the area. No unfamiliar vehicles. No one sitting in a parked car watching. No movement in the shadows between buildings. My legs felt unsteady when I finally got out. The walk to my ground floor unit took me past the community garden where someone had planted late-season vegetables. Tomato plants drooped under the weight of ripening fruit. The normalcy of it, the careful tending, the optimistic planting, made my situation feel even more surreal. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, immediately sensing something wrong. Not a smell or a sound, just wrongness, like the air pressure had changed. The living room looked untouched. Same throw pillows on the couch, same stack of magazines on the coffee table, same framed photographs on the mantel. I moved through to the kitchen. Clean counters, empty sink, refrigerator humming its normal rhythm. My bedroom door stood open. I always closed it before leaving. Always. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached. I pulled my phone from my purse, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. 3 steps to the doorway. 2, 1. The room looked normal at first glance. Bed made, curtains drawn the way I'd left them, dresser drawers closed. Then I saw it. On my pillow, centered perfectly, lay a photograph. I recognized it immediately, the picture that had been on my mantel for 15 years. The one of me and my daughter at her college graduation. Except someone had taken it from its frame, which now sat empty on the mantel in the living room, and placed it here on my bed. Red ink covered our faces in the photo. Crude X marks drawn over our smiling expressions. Beneath the image, written in the same red ink on my white pillowcase. Stop asking questions. My knees buckled. I grabbed the doorframe to stay upright, phone slipping from my suddenly nerveless fingers and hitting the carpet with a muffled thud. The room tilted sideways. I forced air into my lungs, made myself breathe, made myself think. They'd been inside my home. While I was at Marcus's garage, While I was discovering the tracker, someone had entered my locked apartment, had walked through these rooms touching my things, had opened the door I'd closed, had taken that photograph from the mantel, had defaced it with red ink, had placed it on my pillow where I'd lay my head tonight. The red ink looked wet still, slightly smudged at the edges. Fresh. I backed out of the bedroom, eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The closet door hung slightly ajar. Had it been that way before? The bathroom door stood open. I could see the shower curtain drawn closed. Was someone behind it? My phone lay on the bedroom floor. I couldn't make myself go back in to get it. Instead, I moved to the kitchen, grabbed the landline I kept for emergencies, and dialed 911. "Someone broke into my apartment," I said when the dispatcher answered. My voice sounded strange, higher pitched than normal. "They left a message. They've been here recently. Might still be here." "Are you in the apartment now?" "Yes." "Get out. Go to your car and lock the doors. Officers are on the way." I ran. I burst through the apartment building's main entrance into the parking lot, chest heaving, and stopped so abruptly I nearly fell forward. My Honda sat exactly where I'd parked it an hour ago, but something was wrong. The driver's side window reflected the streetlight at an odd angle. I approached slowly, legs shaking, and saw it immediately. Someone had wedged a folded piece of paper between the window and the weather stripping on the driver's side. White paper, visible even in the dim light. The car doors were locked. I could see the button depressed through the glass. My hands trembled as I unlocked it with the key fob. The paper fell into my hand when I opened the door. I unfolded it under the dome light, and ice flooded my veins. The photograph had been taken today. This afternoon, me standing in Marcus's garage, holding up the GPS tracker, my face clearly visible in profile. The angle suggested someone had been watching from across the street, zooming in with a telephoto lens. Below the image, more red ink. "You found one. We have 3 more. 3 more trackers. On my car. On my person. Somewhere." I dropped to my knees on the asphalt and ran my hands along the underside of the Honda, fingers scraping against metal and plastic and accumulated grime. Nothing on the driver's side. I crawled to the passenger side, ignoring the pain in my knees, the rough pavement tearing through my slacks. My fingertips found the wheel well, explored the space behind the tire. There. Another magnetic box, identical to the first. I ripped it free and hurled it across the parking lot. It clattered against the dumpster 20 feet away. 2 down. 2 more to go. I yanked open the car door and searched the interior with frantic hands. Under the seats, in the glove compartment, beneath the floor mats. I pulled up the center console, examined the air vents, ran my palms across every surface. Nothing. I checked my purse next, dumping the contents onto the passenger seat. Wallet, keys, reading glasses, tissue packets, loose receipts. I felt along the lining, probed every pocket. Clean. That left one place. I patted down my jacket, checked every pocket, then froze. My coat. The winter coat I'd been wearing for the past 2 weeks, ever since the temperature dropped. I'd hung it in the bedroom closet when I came home. It was still in there, in that apartment where someone had violated my sanctuary. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Red and blue lights splashed across the building's brick facade as 2 patrol cars wheeled into the lot. I stood up, legs protesting, and raised my hands so they could see them clearly. The first officer out was young, hand resting on his holster. "Gloria Cooper?" "Yes." I gestured toward my apartment window on the 2nd floor. "Someone broke in, left threatening messages. There are tracking devices. They've been following me." The second officer, older with silver hair, approached with a flashlight. He swept the beam across my car's interior, then examined the note still clutched in my left hand. His jaw tightened as he read it. "How many people have keys to your apartment?" "Just me. The landlord has a master, but he's in Florida visiting family." "Any service workers scheduled? Maintenance? Pest control?" I shook my head. My teeth were chattering despite the mild evening air. Shock setting in, some distant part of my brain recognized. The officer noticed too. He guided me toward the patrol car and opened the back door. "Sit down before you fall down." I sank onto the seat, legs dangling out the open door. The younger officer spoke into his radio, requesting additional units and a detective. The silver-haired one crouched beside me, notepad open. "Start from the beginning." I told him about the threatening notes in my car over the past 3 weeks, about finding the first tracker this afternoon, about coming home to discover my bedroom violated, my photograph defaced, about the second note with today's image proving they were watching me in real time. He wrote steadily, not interrupting. When I finished, he stood and conferred with his partner in low tones I couldn't quite hear. The younger officer headed toward the building entrance, speaking into his radio. "We're going to sweep your apartment," the silver-haired officer said. "Check if anyone's still inside or how they gained entry. You stay here. Don't touch anything else in your vehicle. We'll need to process it for prints." More sirens announced the arrival of a third patrol car. 2 officers emerged, and all 4 converged near the building entrance, hands on weapons, before disappearing inside. I sat in the patrol car and watched the windows of my apartment, half expecting to see someone emerge, to finally see a face behind the terror that had consumed my life. The minutes crawled past. My phone was still upstairs on the bedroom floor. I had no way to check the time, could only measure it by my racing heartbeat and the cold sweat drying on my skin. A sedan pulled into the lot, unmarked but obviously law enforcement. A woman in her 40s climbed out, detective shield clipped to her belt. She approached with measured steps, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "Mrs. Cooper?" "Yes." "Detective Janet Reeves. I understand someone's been targeting you." I nodded, unable to form words suddenly. The reality of it crashed over me in waves. Someone had been in my home, touching my things, lying in wait while I slept mere feet away behind an unlocked bedroom door. Detective Reeves studied my face, then the photograph and note still in the other officer's evidence bag. "We're going to find who's doing this," she said quietly. "But I need you to think carefully. Who have you been asking questions about?" The parking lot lights hummed overhead as I stood between the patrol cars, wrapping my arms around myself despite the humid night air. Detective Reeves waited, pen poised above her notepad, eyes fixed on my face. "The retirement community," I said. "Hollow Creek Manor. I've been investigating financial irregularities." Her pen moved across the paper in quick strokes. Behind her, the officers emerged from my building, shaking their heads. No one inside. No forced entry points. The lock had been picked clean, professional work that left no scratches on the brass mechanism. Detective Reeves flipped to a new page in her notebook, then looked up at me with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "Names. Everyone you've confronted or questioned in the past 2 weeks." I rattled off the list. The facility director, the accountant, 3 staff members who'd been too nervous during interviews. With each name, the detective's pen scratched faster across the paper. When I mentioned the missing funds and altered documents, she held up one hand. "Stop. This goes beyond stalking. If you've uncovered embezzlement, these people have real motivation." The patrol car's radio crackled with dispatcher chatter. One officer leaned in to respond, while the others spread out across the parking lot, flashlights sweeping under cars and along the building's foundation. They were searching for signs of surveillance equipment, cameras that might have tracked my movements. I watched them work, my mind racing through the past weeks. Every conversation replayed itself with new clarity. The defensive postures, the quick excuses, the way certain people had avoided my eyes. Someone at Hollow Creek had seen me as a threat worth silencing. Detective Reeves made a phone call, her voice low and urgent. Financial Crimes Division, warrant requests. She mentioned names I'd given her, then disconnected and turned back to me. "You're not going back to that apartment tonight. Is there somewhere safe you can stay?" My daughter's face flashed through my mind, but I'd kept her protected from this investigation deliberately. Dragging her into danger now felt impossible. I shook my head. "Hotel. I'll find a hotel." "No." Detective Reeves pulled out her phone again, fingers moving across the screen. "I'm putting you in protective custody until we make arrests. This person broke into your home, Mrs. Cooper? They've escalated beyond threats." The weight of those words settled over me like concrete. Someone had stood in my bedroom doorway, had watched me sleep, had walked through my private space with enough confidence to leave that photograph on my pillow, a promise and a warning. An officer approached with my keys, now sealed in an evidence bag. My entire apartment had become a crime scene. Everything inside would be photographed, dusted for prints, cataloged as potential evidence. I thought about my coffee mug on the counter, my reading glasses on the nightstand, all the small, mundane pieces of my life now transformed into exhibits. Detective Reeves guided me toward her sedan, one hand firm on my elbow. She opened the passenger door, and I slid inside, the leather seats still warm from her drive over. The smell of coffee and paper files filled the interior. "We'll need you to come to the station, give a full statement," she said, starting the engine. "Everything you found at Hollow Creek, every document, every conversation. This investigation just became criminal." I nodded, watching my building shrink in the side mirror as we pulled away. The patrol cars remained behind, officers still searching the grounds with methodical precision. Crime scene tape would go up across my door. Neighbors would gossip and speculate. My private violation would become public spectacle. The station buzzed with late-night activity, officers processing arrests, phones ringing, the smell of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Detective Reeves led me through the maze of desks to a small interview room. The walls were beige, the table scarred with years of use. A camera mounted in the corner blinked its red recording light. She set a bottle of water in front of me, then arranged her notes and recorder on the table between us. "From the beginning," she said. "Tell me everything." I spoke for 2 hours. My voice grew hoarse, describing the ledgers, the forged signatures, the residents who'd complained about missing money from their accounts. Detective Reeves interrupted occasionally with sharp questions, making me clarify dates and times and exact wording of conversations. Another detective joined us halfway through, a younger man who took his own notes and asked about security systems at Hollow Creek. Dawn broke outside the small window, pale light filtering through the blinds. My exhaustion felt like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. But I continued talking, laying out every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every suspicion I'd developed. When I finally finished, Detective Reeves sat back in her chair and exchanged a long look with her colleague. "We're executing warrants this morning," she said. "Financial records, personnel files, security footage from the facility. You've given us enough for probable cause." Relief and fear twisted together in my chest. This was what I'd wanted, justice for the residents being exploited, accountability for those who'd stolen from vulnerable people. But I'd also painted a target on myself that wouldn't disappear just because arrests were made. Detective Reeves stood and opened the door, gesturing to an officer in the hallway. "Take Mrs. Cooper to the safe house. Post someone outside until we have suspects in custody." The officer nodded and motioned for me to follow. We walked through the station and out to an unmarked car in the secure lot. The morning air felt cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the stale atmosphere of the interview room. As we drove through the city streets, I watched the world wake up around us. People heading to work, joggers on the sidewalks, the ordinary rhythm of life continuing while mine had been completely upended. But somewhere in that normalcy, someone who'd threatened me was about to face the consequences of their actions. Story block 10:10. 6 months had passed since that morning drive to the safe house. I stood in my new apartment's kitchen, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, watching sunlight paint geometric patterns across the hardwood floor. The space smelled of fresh paint and the lavender plant I'd placed on the windowsill. 3 rooms, 2nd floor, security system that actually worked. A life rebuilt from scratch. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up and read the message from my lawyer. "Final settlement approved. Funds transferring today." The wrongful termination lawsuit had been brutal but necessary. Oak Ridge Manor had fought hard, their corporate attorneys attempting to bury me in paperwork and delays. But Detective Reeves' investigation had uncovered everything: the embezzlement scheme, the falsified records, the systematic exploitation of residents whose families trusted the facility with their loved ones' care and savings. I set the phone down and walked to the living room, where cardboard boxes still lined one wall. Inside the nearest box, I found the framed photo I'd been searching for. My graduation from nursing school 38 years ago. My younger self smiled back at me, full of hope and determination. I placed it on the bookshelf beside my new nursing license for hospice care. The trial had lasted 3 weeks. I'd sat in the courtroom every single day, watching as prosecutors presented bank statements, forged signatures, and testimony from families who'd lost everything. The facility's financial director had broken first, accepting a plea deal in exchange for testimony against the administrator and 2 board members. Their sentences had been handed down last month: 8 to 15 years for conspiracy, fraud, and elder abuse. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I checked the peephole, a habit I couldn't break, and saw LaToya standing in the hallway holding a covered dish. I opened the door and smiled. "You didn't have to bring anything," I said. "Housewarming tradition." She walked past me into the kitchen, setting the dish on the counter. "Plus, I know you're still living off takeout and coffee." She wasn't wrong. LaToya had been the state ombudsman assigned to investigate the initial complaints at Oak Ridge Manor. Our paths had crossed during the investigation, and somehow we'd become friends through the chaos. She'd testified at the trial, her professional analysis of the facility's violations filling hours of court testimony. I lifted the foil from the dish and breathed in the aroma of baked chicken and vegetables. My stomach reminded me I'd skipped breakfast. "Thank you," I said quietly. LaToya leaned against the counter, her expression turning serious. She pulled an envelope from her purse and handed it to me. I recognized the return address immediately: the State Board of Nursing. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a formal letter of commendation for whistleblowing that led to systemic reform in elder care facilities across 3 counties. New regulations had been implemented, surprise inspections mandated, and a dedicated fraud hotline established. "They want you to speak at the Healthcare Ethics Conference next month," LaToya said. "Your choice, but I think people need to hear your story." I folded the letter and set it aside. Public speaking terrified me more than those threatening notes ever had. But silence had never been an option, not once I'd known what was happening to those residents. "I'll think about it," I said. After LaToya left, I spent the afternoon unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. My muscles ached from lifting and moving, but the physical labor felt therapeutic. Each item I placed was a deliberate choice, a conscious act of building something new. At sunset, I drove to the cemetery on the east side of town. The grass had grown thick over the summer months, green and carefully maintained. I walked to the grave of Mrs. Patterson, the resident who died 3 weeks after I'd found that first threatening note in my car. Her family had filed a civil suit once the criminal investigation revealed how her medications had been diluted to save money, how her care plan had been fabricated, how her final months had been stolen by greed. I placed fresh flowers on her grave, white roses that caught the fading light. The stone was simple: her name, her dates, and a line from her favorite hymn. I knelt and touched the cool marble. "They paid," I whispered. "All of them." The wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying the scent of cut grass and distant rain. I stayed there until darkness began to settle, until the groundskeeper's truck appeared on the access road, signaling closing time. Back at my apartment, I made tea and sat by the window overlooking the street. Cars passed below, their headlights cutting through the evening gloom. Somewhere in this city, former colleagues from Oak Ridge Manor were rebuilding their lives too. Those who'd been complicit now carried criminal records, those who'd been afraid now had protection, and those who'd suffered had received compensation, though money could never truly restore what had been taken. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from the hospice agency where I'd accepted a position starting next week. "Orientation schedule, required paperwork, welcome packet. A chance to return to actual nursing, to provide comfort and dignity to people in their final days, to do the work I'd trained for decades ago before administrative roles and corporate healthcare had complicated everything." I saved the documents and opened my laptop. The blank document stared back at me, the beginning of the testimony I'd need to prepare if I agreed to speak at the conference. My fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment before I began typing. "My name is Gloria Cooper, and I'm a nurse. This is what I witnessed, what I risked, and why silence was never an option." The words came slowly at first, then faster as I found my rhythm. Outside my window, the city lights flickered on one by one, a constellation of life continuing in all its messy, complicated, necessary reality. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new reasons to stay vigilant. But tonight, I had this moment of quiet safety, this space I'd fought to create, this proof that speaking truth could survive collision with power. My coffee had gone cold by the time I finished writing. I saved the document and closed the laptop, then stood and stretched, feeling every one of my 62 years in my joints and muscles. But I also felt something else, a steadiness I hadn't experienced in months, maybe years. The kind of calm that comes only after surviving a storm and learning you're stronger than you knew. I turned off the lights and headed to bed, double-checking the locks out of habit, leaving one small lamp burning in the living room. Just enough light to navigate by if I needed it. Just enough light to prove the darkness hadn't won. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.